The first engagement began less than 5 minutes later. A Krell battle moon, a mobile fortress that had survived dozens of direct assaults, vanished without warning. There was no explosion, no radiation spike, and no debris field. One moment it existed, the next it did not. Sensors showed a clean absence where millions of tons of mass had once been. Krell commanders initially believed it was a malfunction until identical events occurred across their front line. Human weapons did not strike targets. They erased them. Space-time distortions collapsed localized regions of reality, removing ships, stations, and weapons platforms as if they had never been there. Defensive shields were meaningless because there was nothing to block. Armor was irrelevant because there was nothing to absorb. The attack bypassed every known principle of warfare by refusing to engage with it at all. The VSH collective responded with overwhelming numbers, deploying tens of thousands of autonomous combat drones in coordinated swarms. The response from the human fleet was invisible. Within seconds, VSH command networks began reporting contradictory data. Drone AIs flagged friendly units as hostile. Targeting solutions looped endlessly. Entire swarms turned inward, annihilating themselves in chaotic crossfire. Human cyber warfare did not hack systems. It rewrote their assumptions about reality. Attempts to counterattack failed before they began. Target locks could not be maintained. Human ships did not appear to maneuver, yet they were never where weapons were aimed. Some commanders reported that the vessels seemed to anticipate attacks before they were issued, adjusting position preemptively. Others claimed their fire controls showed successful hits on ships that had never been there to begin with. Within 30 minutes, the battlefield no longer resembled a war zone. It was a series of empty regions where fleets had once existed, interspersed with panic retreat signals. Human ships continued advancing, methodical and precise, never accelerating, never communicating, never stopping. The first engagement began less than 5 minutes later. A Krell battle moon, a mobile fortress that had survived dozens of direct assaults, vanished without warning. There was no explosion, no radiation spike, and no debris field. One moment it existed. The next it did not. Sensors showed a clean absence where millions of tons of mass had once been. Krell commanders initially believed it was a malfunction until identical events occurred across their front line. Human weapons did not strike targets. They erased them. Space-time distortions collapsed localized regions of reality, removing ships, stations, and weapons platforms as if they had never been there. Defensive shields were meaningless because there was nothing to block. Armor was irrelevant because there was nothing to absorb. The attack bypassed every known principle of warfare by refusing to engage with it at all. The VSH collective responded with overwhelming numbers, deploying tens of thousands of autonomous combat drones in coordinated swarms. The response from the human fleet was invisible. Within seconds, VSH command networks began reporting contradictory data. Drone AIs flagged friendly units as hostile. Targeting solutions looped endlessly. Entire swarms turned inward, annihilating themselves in chaotic crossfire. Human cyber warfare did not hack systems. It rewrote their assumptions about reality. Attempts to counterattack failed before they began. Target locks could not be maintained. Human ships did not appear to maneuver, yet they were never where weapons were aimed. Some commanders reported that the vessels seemed to anticipate attacks before they were issued, adjusting position preemptively. Others claimed their fire controls showed successful hits on ships that had never been there to begin with. Within 30 minutes, the battlefield no longer resembled a war zone. It was a series of empty regions where fleets had once existed, interspersed with panic retreat signals. Human ships continued advancing, methodical and precise, never accelerating, never communicating, never stopping. As the first hour passed, panic replaced strategy. Krell war doctrine relied on overwhelming force and honor-bound engagement, neither of which mattered against an enemy that did not fight in recognizable terms. VSH Hive logic collapsed under the strain of corrupted data, unable to adapt to an adversary that attacked decision-making itself. Illyrian diplomats attempted to open negotiations, only to realize that humans were not communicating with individual factions at all. They were treating the entire conflict as a single problem to be removed. Human strikes became increasingly surgical. Command ships vanished first, followed by logistics hubs, then industrial world supporting the war effort. Civilian populations were largely untouched, not out of mercy, but because they were irrelevant to the objective. The humans were not punishing enemies. They were ending a system. For hours into the conflict, resistance became impossible. Fleets that attempted to flee found their navigation systems subtly altered, depositing them in dead space far from any strategic value. Others simply powered down, their crews unwilling to continue fighting an enemy that never acknowledged them. The galactic net filled with fragmented reports, rumors, and a single repeating question. How had humanity become this powerful without anyone noticing? At exactly 5 hours after the first human ship appeared, all hostile action ceased. There were no enemy fleets left capable of combat. No superweapons remained operational. No command structure survived intact. The war that had consumed half the galaxy for 3 years was over. A final human message was transmitted, addressed not to any single species, but to the galaxy as a whole. Humanity stated that the conflict had been resolved, that further warfare in the region would not be permitted, and that enforcement would continue indefinitely. Then the human fleet departed the same way it had arrived, leaving behind a silent battlefield and a galaxy forced to reconsider everything it thought it knew about humans. In the days following the 5-hour war, the galaxy struggled to process what had happened. Entire military hierarchies were gone, yet most inhabited worlds remained intact. This contradicted every known pattern of conquest. Victorious species always expanded, demanded tribute, or imposed rule. Humanity did none of these. They did not claim territory, seize resources, or install governors. Instead, they established something entirely new: enforced silence. Regions previously defined by constant conflict were now under continuous human surveillance, monitored by systems no one could detect or disrupt. Galactic researchers began analyzing archived human behavior, searching for warning signs they had missed. What they found was unsettling. Humanity had a long history of restraint followed by overwhelming response. On Earth, humans rarely escalated conflicts first, but when they did, they focused on ending wars decisively rather than winning them gradually. Their military philosophy emphasized speed, psychological dominance, and permanent resolution. The galaxy had mistaken patience for weakness. Surviving military leaders were summoned to a neutral station under human control. There were no guards in sight, no visible weapons, and no threats issued. Humans explained that the war had reached an unacceptable threshold of instability and resource waste. Allowing it to continue pose a long-term risk to galactic infrastructure, trade routes, and emerging civilizations. Ending it quickly had been the most efficient solution. To humans, this was not conquest. It was crisis management. As months passed, deeper truths emerged. Humanity had not developed its technology in isolation, but in preparation. Their scientists had focused less on raw firepower and more on control systems, predictive modeling, and denial of enemy capability. Human war simulations ran millions of scenarios in advance, accounting for cultural behavior, decision-making delays, and psychological collapse points. By the time the first human ship appeared, the war's outcome had already been calculated down to the hour. Alien engineers attempting to replicate human technology failed repeatedly. Human systems relied on layer redundancies and adaptive algorithms that changed behavior when observed, studying them altered their function, making reverse engineering impossible. It became clear that humanity had crossed a threshold where their technology no longer behaved like tools but like extensions of strategic intent. More disturbing was the discovery that humans had been monitoring the war from beginning. Silent probes hidden across multiple dimensions of detection had recorded every engagement, every tactic, and every failure. Humanity had waited not because they were unprepared, but because they were deciding whether intervention was necessary at all. When they finally acted, it was because the war had reached a point where no faction could be trusted to stop on its own. The long-term consequences reshaped galactic politics. Military expansion slowed dramatically across all civilizations. Superweapon research programs were quietly dismantled, not because humans demanded it, but because everyone understood the implication. Escalation invited attention. Humanity did not need to patrol aggressively. Their reputation alone enforced compliance more effectively than any fleet. Over time, limited contact resumed. Human diplomats engaged in trade, scientific exchange, and cultural cooperation, behaving with calm professionalism. They were not hostile, but they were unmistakably firm. Boundaries were stated clearly, consequences implied rather than explained. No species challenged them. None were willing to test whether the 5-hour war had been restraint or demonstration. Historians would later agree on one conclusion. Humanity had not ended the war because they sought dominance. They ended it because, to them, prolonged conflict was inefficient. The galaxy had learned a brutal lesson. Humans did not rush into war, but when they finally did, they did not fight to compete. They fought to finish. Despite humanity's calm diplomatic presence, fear lingered beneath every interaction. Other species began altering their military doctrines, not to fight humans, but to avoid ever provoking them. War colleges rewrote textbooks, replacing centuries of strategy with a single principle: do not become a problem humanity feels compelled to solve. Even simulated conflicts were constrained, capped artificially to avoid patterns that might resemble the earlier galactic war. Rumors spread among intelligence communities that humans possessed additional capabilities never revealed during the 5-hour intervention. The logic was simple and terrifying. No species deploys its most powerful tools in a first demonstration. Analysts speculated that what the galaxy had witnessed was not humanity at full strength, but humanity using the minimum force required to end the conflict. That realization unsettled even the most confident civilizations. Human internal communications, later partially declassified, revealed a perspective few had anticipated. Within Earth's leadership, the intervention was considered a failure of diplomacy, not a triumph of warfare. Debates centered on why earlier warning systems had not been sufficient, and how similar conflicts could be prevented without direct intervention. To humans, the cost of ending the war in 5 hours was not measured in enemy losses, but in the precedent it set. Human strategists worried that the galaxy would now associate stability with fear rather than cooperation. They feared being seen as enforcers instead of partners. As a result, humanity increased investment in shared infrastructure projects, interstellar disaster response, and open scientific initiatives. These actions were deliberate attempts to redefine their role, though no one could forget how quickly that role had once shifted. Meanwhile, fringe groups across the galaxy interpreted the event very differently. To them, humanity represented inevitability. Some worshipped humans as cosmic arbiters. Others viewed them as an existential threat that would eventually suppress all autonomy. Underground movements formed, dedicated to developing weapons or tactics specifically designed to counter human intervention, though none came close to practical success. Ironically, these groups were allowed to exist. Humans monitored them but did not interfere. From the human perspective, dissent was data. Observing how fear transformed into ideology helped refine predictive models. Humanity did not fear rebellion. They feared ignorance. Allowing these movements to reveal themselves was safer than forcing them underground. 10 years after the war, a new generation reached maturity across multiple species. For them, the 5-hour war was history rather than trauma. They grew up in a galaxy largely free of large-scale conflict, connected by trade routes that had once been battlegrounds. To many of them, humans were simply another advanced species, respected but distant. That perception worried human analysts more than fear ever had. Complacency bred risk. Humanity quietly updated its monitoring systems, expanding beyond known space and into regions previously considered unreachable. The galaxy believed the war had ended an era. Humans believed it had only revealed a pattern, one likely to repeat elsewhere. Beyond the mapped edges of known space, something had noticed the 5-hour war. Ancient sensor arrays, dormant for millennia, registered anomalies that did not match natural phenomena. The sudden disappearance of mass, the localized collapse of physical constants, and the coordinated shutdown of galactic-scale conflict-triggered protocols older than most civilizations. For entities that measured time in epochs, the human intervention was not impressive because of violence, but because of its efficiency. These entities had seen wars before. They had even engineered some of them. But no species had ever demonstrated the ability to terminate a multi-faction conflict so quickly without destabilizing the surrounding regions. Humanity had not merely ended a war. They had altered the statistical expectations of how intelligent life behaved under pressure. That made them interesting and potentially dangerous. The first sign of this external attention appeared as subtle inconsistencies. Long-range probes vanished without trace. Communication relays experienced delays that could not be explained by distance or interference. Entire star charts required constant correction, as if space itself were being quietly rearranged. Most civilizations dismissed these anomalies as technical errors. Humans did not. Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division flagged the pattern within weeks. It matched none of the known cosmic threats, nor any artificial intelligence framework previously encountered. Human analysts concluded that something was observing the galaxy in response to the war, testing boundaries without direct contact. Humanity responded by doing what they had done before. Nothing outwardly. Internally, contingency planning accelerated. While governments debated and scientists theorized, civilian life continued to evolve. Interstellar travel became safer. Mixed species colonies flourished. Cultural exchange reached levels previously impossible during wartime. To many, the galaxy felt stable for the first time in recorded history. This stability was fragile, built not on trust, but on the shared memory of what happened when humanity intervened. Human culture itself changed as well. The 5-hour war became a cautionary tale taught in academies, not as a victory, but as a reminder of responsibility. Younger humans questioned whether such power should ever be used again. Older generations argued that refusing to use it would be even more dangerous. The debate never resolved, only matured. The observing entities finally acted, not with an attack, but with message embedded into background radiation itself. It was not addressed to any single species, but it was unmistakably intelligible to humans. The message acknowledged humanity's capability and questioned its intent. It asked whether humans saw themselves as participants in the galactic system or as its regulators. Human leadership understood the implication immediately. This was not first contact. It was an audit. Whatever lay beyond known space had tolerated chaos as a natural state, but humanity's actions suggested chaos could be controlled. That challenged assumptions far older than any civilization currently alive. How humanity answered would shape not just the galaxy, but whatever existed beyond it. Humanity did not reply immediately. They analyzed the message, its structure, and the physics required to transmit it. The conclusion was unsettling. The sender possessed capabilities that rivaled, and possibly exceeded, humanity's own. The 5-hour war had not intimidated them. It had invited comparison. When humans finally responded, their message was brief and carefully worded. They stated that they did not seek control, only survivability. War at sufficient scale threatened everything, including observers who believed themselves distant from its consequences. Humanity had intervened not to dominate, but to prevent collapse. The response from beyond known space did not come right away, but human systems registered a shift, subtle and deliberate. Whatever was watching had adjusted its expectations. The galaxy, unaware of this exchange, continued its fragile peace, not knowing it had become part of a much larger evaluation. The evaluation began without warning. Across multiple regions of the galaxy, natural constants fluctuated within survivable limits, subtle enough to avoid panic, but precise enough to test response. Trade routes experienced sudden gravitational shifts. Stable stars entered unexpected phases. Communication delays increased by fractions of a second that only advanced civilizations could detect. To most species, these events appeared random. To humans, they formed a pattern. Human response was immediate but invisible. Automated correction systems adjusted orbital paths, reinforced energy grids, and rerouted traffic before disruptions escalated. No public announcements were made. No alerts were issued. Humanity treated the disturbances the same way they had treated the war years earlier, as a system failure that needed stabilization, not confrontation. The observing entities took note. Humanity was not reacting emotionally. They were compensating, adapting, and preserving functionality across a network far larger than their own territory. The next phase tested restraint. Artificial conflicts emerged along historical fault lines, reigniting old grievances between minor powers. Resource shortages appeared in carefully selected regions, designed to provoke competition rather than cooperation. The galaxy stood at the edge of repeating its past. This time, humanity did not deploy fleets. Instead, they intervened indirectly. Supply chains were optimized. Mediation frameworks were offered without ultimatums. Economic incentives quietly removed the pressure points that would have led to war. Where conflict could not be avoided, it was localized and resolved before escalation became possible. For the observers beyond known space, this was unexpected. Humanity had already demonstrated the ability to end wars instantly. Choosing not to do so revealed a deeper capability, the ability to prevent wars without being seen. Satisfied that humanity understood both power and restraint, the observers initiated final contact. This time, the message was direct and unambiguous. They revealed themselves as custodians of long-term cosmic stability, entities that allowed civilizations to rise and fall as part of broader equilibrium. Wars were tolerated because they rarely threatened the system as a whole. Humanity's 5-hour intervention had broken that pattern. The observers admitted they had misjudged humanity. They had expected domination or fear-driven control. Instead, they saw a species that viewed overwhelming power as a last resort and stability as an obligation. Humanity was offered a choice: withdraw from intervention entirely and allow the galaxy to follow its natural course, or accept a shared role in maintaining equilibrium beyond known space. Human deliberation lasted weeks. Philosophers, scientists, military leaders, and civilians participated in the decision. History weighed heavily on every discussion. Humanity knew the cost of authority and the danger of refusing it. In the end, the choice was neither full acceptance nor complete rejection. Humanity agreed to act as a stabilizing force, but only within defined limits. They would not rule, judge culture, or suppress development. They would intervene only when conflicts or events threatened irreversible collapse. Their role would be transparent, constrained, and accountable. Power without restraint, humans argued, was simply another form of chaos. The observers accepted the terms. For the first time in recorded cosmic history, custodianship was shared rather than imposed. Centuries later, historians will look back on the 5-hour war as a misunderstanding. It was not humanity's arrival that ended an era of conflict, but the revelation it caused. The galaxy learned that strength did not have to be loud, cruel, or constant. It could be precise, reluctant, and final. Humanity never fought another war on that scale. They did not need to. Their presence reshaped expectations, not through fear alone, but through consistency. When they acted, they ended problems. When they remained silent, systems were allowed to grow. And so the story endured, passed quietly across generations and species alike. Humans were not the first to reach the stars, nor the most ancient. But when they finally entered the war, they showed the galaxy something it had never seen before. A species that did not fight to win, conquer, or dominate, but to finish what should never have been allowed to begin.